She moved into a treehouse, while the whole town watched and whispered, calling her crazy, calling her unhinged, saying she'd lost her mind, along with everything else. But when she discovered what was hidden behind those wooden walls, when she found the secret room that had been sealed for over 40 years, their laughter died in their throats, and the woman they mocked became the one who would change everything. Before we dive into the story, don't forget to hit subscribe, because tomorrow we have an extra special story for you that will blow your mind. Morning sun filtered through the oak leaves like liquid gold, but Maya Hartwell barely noticed. She was standing at the foot of an enormous elm at the east end of Riverside Bend, Oregon, staring up at what the locals had called the crazy treehouse for nearly 3 decades. Her daughter, Iris, stood beside her, a small hand clutched tight in Maya's calloused palm. The girl was 7, with a riot of red curls and eyes that had already seen too much sadness for one so young. Maya was 34, but she felt ancient. Her dark hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and she wore paint-stained jeans that would never come clean, and a flannel shirt 2 sizes too big. It had been her father's before he passed away. She had lost weight over the last 18 months, the kind of weight loss that comes from stress, the kind that eats away at bone and muscle until all that's left is survival. Once she had been Maya Hartwell Chen, a rising architect at one of Portland's most prestigious firms. She designed luxury condos with floor-to-ceiling windows, modern mansions with infinity pools, commercial buildings that won awards, and graced the pages of glossy magazines. She'd had it all: a husband, David, who worked in finance, a sprawling home in the West Hills with heated floors and a wine cellar, a walk-in closet bigger than most people's bedrooms, designer clothes, yearly trips to Europe, a nanny for Iris, and a housekeeper who came 3 times a week. She thought she was living the dream. It turns out, dreams can rot from the inside out while you're too busy to notice. The divorce was brutal. David had been having an affair with his assistant for 2 years. 2 years of lies served up with a smile over breakfast. 2 years of late nights he'd blamed on work, when he was really in hotel rooms that Maya's salary helped pay for. When she finally found out the truth, he didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. He just hired the most ruthless lawyer in the state and went for the throat. Maya had been naive. She thought justice mattered, that the courts protected mothers and children. But David's family had money, old money, the kind that bought favors and bent rules. When the dust settled, she had lost nearly everything. The house went to David. The savings were split, but he somehow ended up with the lion's share. He got the cars, the furniture, the life they had built. She was left with weekends with Iris and a cramped apartment in a part of Portland where gunshots punctuated the night like a metronome, keeping time with her racing heart. But the worst part, the part that still made her throat close up when she thought about it, was losing her job. David's family had connections everywhere, including the firm where she worked. 3 months after the divorce was finalized, they let her go. Budget cuts, they'd said. Restructuring. She knew better. She'd seen the way her boss avoided her eyes, the way he'd rushed through the exit interview. She had been erased. For 6 months, she sent out resumes. Nothing. Not even an interview. David's reach was longer than she'd imagined. Or maybe the world of architecture was just that small. Either way, the money ran out fast. The tiny apartment became unaffordable. The car was repossessed. She started taking any work she could find, waiting tables, cleaning houses, anything that paid cash and didn't ask questions. That's when she saw the ad. Property for sale, Riverside Bend, unique structure, vision required. $15,000 or best offer. Riverside Bend was a town of about 4,000 people nestled in the foothills of the Cascades, 2 hours from Portland. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, where secrets lasted about 5 minutes, and where newcomers were examined like specimens under a microscope. The property listing had been up for 8 months with no takers. She drove out on a gray Tuesday morning with Iris asleep in the passenger seat of a borrowed Honda. When she saw it for the first time, she understood why no one else wanted it. The treehouse stood 30 feet in the air, nestled in a clutch of old-growth trees, elms, horse chestnuts, and Douglas firs, with trunks as thick as cars and branches that knotted together like gnarled fingers. The structure itself was weathered wood, bleached by time and rain, with a steep roof and narrow windows that looked like suspicious eyes. A suspension bridge connected it to the ground, swaying gently in the wind, its wooden slats worn but intact. It looked like something out of a fairy tale, the kind where children get eaten. But Maya didn't see danger. She saw bones, structure, engineering. Her architect's eye traced the building's lines, noting the careful joinery, the way the weight was distributed across multiple trees, the reinforced platform that had clearly been designed by someone who understood load-bearing and wind shear. This wasn't some weekend project by an amateur. This was real architecture, hidden in the trees like a secret. The real estate agent, a nervous woman named Cheryl with frosted tips and a Bluetooth earpiece, was almost apologetic. "I know it's unusual," she said. "The previous owner died about 10 years ago and the property's been in probate hell ever since. Couldn't locate any family. The county finally took possession and just wants to be rid of it. Honestly, between you and me, most folks think it's cursed." "Cursed?" Maya repeated, her face unreadable. Cheryl shrugged. "You know how small towns are. The fella who built it was supposedly some eccentric recluse. Lived up here all by himself, never talked to anyone. One day he just vanished. Some say he fell off the bridge and the river took him. Others say he ran off or died up there and the animals scattered the bones. Either way, the place has been empty since about 2000. Kids used to dare each other to spend the night, but the county put up no trespassing signs about 5 years back." Maya walked the property line, examining the foundation posts, the cable system that supported the bridge, the way the trees had grown around the structure without crushing it. Whoever built this knew what they were doing. More than that, they loved what they were doing. She could see it in the details, the carved handrails, the way the windows were placed to catch the sunrise, the small, covered porch that wrapped around two sides. "I'll take it," she said. 12,000. Cash. It's everything I have." Cheryl blinked. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious." The sale closed in 3 weeks. Maya used every last cent she had, every dollar scraped together from odd jobs and her dwindling savings account. She didn't tell anyone what she was doing. Not her mother, who lived in Arizona and called once a month with critiques disguised as concern. Not the few friends she had left, who had slowly drifted away after the divorce. She just signed the papers, took the keys, and made a plan to move. Riverside Bend found out soon enough. Small towns have a radar for new blood, especially blood that looks troubled. By the time Maya drove down Main Street in a rented U-Haul truck packed with her few belongings, half the town already knew. The woman who bought the treehouse, the one from Portland, heard she lost everything in a divorce, heard she's got a kid. What kind of mother moves a child into a treehouse? Must be desperate. Must be crazy. Must be both. Maya felt the stares like pinpricks. She stopped at the general store for groceries, and the conversation died the moment she walked through the door. Women with shopping baskets looked her up and down, their expressions a mixture of pity and contempt. An acne-faced teenager rang up her items in silence, but she heard the whispers start up again the moment she walked out. She drove to the property just after noon. The U-Haul barely fit down the narrow dirt road that led to the treehouse. When she finally parked and got out, she saw them. Neighbors, onlookers, people who had come for the show. They stood at the edge of her property, maybe a dozen of them, some with arms crossed, others pointing openly. A man in his 50s with a thick beard and a hunting vest called out, "You really gonna live up there with a kid?" Maya straightened her shoulders. That's right. A thin-faced woman with graying hair shook her head. That's child endangerment. Someone should call social services. The structure is sound, Maya said, keeping her voice steady, though her hands were shaking. I had it inspected. Inspected by who? The bearded man scoffed. No one's been up there in a decade. Whole thing could come down. It won't come down, Maya said. She didn't mention that she'd inspected it herself, that she'd spent 3 days climbing over every inch of the structure, testing joints, checking for rot, examining the cable systems. She didn't mention her architectural degree or her years of experience, because these people didn't care about credentials. They cared about gossip, about feeling superior, about having someone to look down on. Iris got out of the truck, her small backpack clutched to her chest. She looked at the crowd, then up at Maya, her eyes wide and frightened. Maya felt something inside her chest crack. This was supposed to be a new start. This was supposed to be better. Come on, sweetie, she said softly, taking Iris's hand. Let's go see our new home. They walked together toward the suspension bridge. The whispers from the crowd followed them like mosquitoes. Maya tested the planks, first with her own weight, then with theirs together. The bridge swayed but held firm. She scooped Iris into her arms and carried her across, the little girl's arms wrapped tightly around her neck. The trip up took 5 minutes. When they reached the platform, Maya unlocked the door. She'd half expected a disaster, but the interior took her breath away. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating a single large room with vaulted ceilings and exposed beams. The floor was wide plank pine, weathered with age. There was a small kitchen area with an ancient-looking stove, a wood-burning fireplace with a stone hearth, built-in bookshelves along one wall, and a sleeping loft accessible by a wooden ladder. It was all dusty, draped in cobwebs and mouse droppings, but beneath the grime she could see the craftsmanship. True artistry. The joinery was flawless. Every beam fit perfectly. Every joint was sound. The windows were double-paned, likely a later addition for insulation. There was even a small bathroom tucked in a corner with a composting toilet and a shower stall. "Mama," Iris whispered, "it's like a castle." Maya felt tears prick her eyes. "Yes, baby, it is." They spent the afternoon hauling boxes across the swaying bridge. Maya's arms ached. Her back screamed, but she didn't stop. With every trip, she felt eyes on her from below. The crowd had thinned, but not disappeared. She ignored them, let them watch, let them judge. She had survived worse than small-town cruelty. By sunset, most of their belongings were inside. It wasn't much. Clothes, books, Iris's toys, a few kitchen supplies. 2 mattresses they had wrestled up the bridge like awkward rafts. No furniture, no television. Nothing of value because there was nothing of value left. just the bare essentials of a life stripped down. Maya made grilled cheese sandwiches on the old stove, which miraculously still worked, and they ate sitting on the floor as the sun dipped behind the mountains. Through the western windows, the sky turned orange, then pink, then a deep, bruised purple. The trees rustled in the evening breeze. Somewhere below, the Riverside River rushed over stones, its voice a constant shush. "Are we going to be okay?" Iris asked quietly. Maya looked at her daughter, at those eyes that trusted her despite everything, and she lied. "Yes, baby. We're going to be okay." After Iris fell asleep on her mattress in the loft, Maya sat alone in the main room, wrapped in a blanket, watching the moon rise through the branches. The treehouse made noises, creaks and groans as the wood settled, skitterings in the walls that might have been mice or squirrels. But there was something else, too, something she couldn't quite place. She rose and moved slowly around the room, running her hands along the walls. The craftsmanship was remarkable. The timbers were hand-hewn, fitted together with a precision that bespoke an obsessive attention to detail. But there were oddities, too. Nooks where the interior wall didn't quite align with the exterior dimensions. A section near the bookshelf where the wood sounded hollow when she knocked. A floorboard near the hearth that sat just a fraction of an inch higher than its neighbors. Her architect's mind cataloged these inconsistencies automatically. The room was smaller than it should be, given the outer footprint. Not by much, perhaps 3 or 4 feet in total, but enough to notice if you knew what to look for. And Maya knew. She pulled out a small notebook and began to sketch, measuring with her paces, jotting down angles and dimensions. The longer she looked, the more convinced she became that there was an unaccounted-for space, a hidden space. A sound made her freeze. A soft thud from somewhere within the walls, followed by what sounded almost like footsteps. She held her breath, listening. The wind, perhaps, or animals in the rafters. Old houses made noises. Old tree houses probably made even more. But Maya had designed enough buildings to know the difference between a structure settling and something else. This was something else. She climbed the ladder to check on Iris, who was sleeping peacefully, one arm slung around a stuffed rabbit that had seen better days. Maya kissed her forehead gently, then went back downstairs. She added another log to the fire, watching the flames catch and spread. Tomorrow, she would start looking for work. Tomorrow, she would enroll Iris in the local school. Tomorrow, she would face the judgment and the whispers and prove to this town that she wasn't broken, wasn't crazy, wasn't someone to be pitied. But tonight, in this strange, beautiful treehouse suspended between earth and sky, she allowed herself to simply breathe. She thought of David in his big house with his new wife, probably eating at the dining table Maya had picked out, sitting in the chairs she had chosen. She thought of her old life, the one that looked so perfect from the outside but had been rotting from within. She thought of how far she had fallen, and how much farther she still had to go. But then she looked around this single room, with its worn floors and hand-carved details, at the way the moonlight painted silver squares on the pine boards, at the life she and Iris would build here from nothing. And she felt something unexpected. Hope. Small, fragile, and terrifying, but hope all the same. The next morning arrived with birdsong and the scent of wood smoke. Maya awoke on her mattress near the hearth, stiff and cold despite the blanket. She had forgotten how chilly October mornings could be in the mountains. She rekindled the fire, made instant coffee with water heated on the stove, and watched the sunrise paint the world gold through the eastern windows. Iris woke slowly, climbing down from the loft with sleepy eyes and tangled hair. They ate cereal without milk because the small refrigerator wasn't cold yet, and Maya made a mental list of everything that needed to be done. Winterize the treehouse. Check the heating system. Seal every draft. Stockpile firewood. Find work. Enroll Iris in school. Ignore the judgmental stares. Survive. Just survive. She walked Iris across the swaying bridge and down to the road where the school bus would come. Other children were already gathering at various points along the rural route. Maya saw a few parents watching from their cars, whispering. She saw children pointing at Iris, already marking her as different. "It's going to be okay," Maya said, kneeling to Iris's level. "If anyone is mean, you tell the teacher." "What if the teacher is mean too?" Iris asked softly. Maya's heart fractured a little. "Then you tell me, and I will handle it." The bus arrived with a squeal of brakes. Iris climbed on, and Maya watched through the window as the other children looked, then looked away. The bus pulled off, and Maya stood alone on the dirt road, feeling the weight of every choice that had brought her here. She spent the morning cleaning the treehouse, sweeping out years of accumulated dust and debris, scrubbing the windows until the light poured in unobstructed, washing the floors on her hands and knees. The physical labor felt good, purposeful, and it gave her time to observe. The more she cleaned, the more she noticed. The bookshelf along the east wall was built into the structure itself, but it was deeper than it needed to be. The stone fireplace had an odd gap behind it, visible only if you lay on the floor and looked up into the flue. And that floorboard by the hearth, the one that sat higher than the others. When she put her weight on it, the board gave slightly, as if something beneath it had compressed. Maya took out her notebook again and added a few more sketches. She measured the interior dimensions of the room, then went outside and measured the exterior. The math didn't add up. There were approximately 4 feet of space on the east wall that existed on the outside but not on the inside. 4 feet of nothing, or 4 feet of something. She was about to investigate further when she heard voices below. Maya walked to the railing and peered down to see 3 women standing beneath the tree. They were in their 40s or 50s, dressed in practical denim vests, their hair pulled back. "Hello up there," one of them called. "Can we help you?" Maya called back. "We wanted to introduce ourselves," the woman answered. She had graying blonde hair and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm Jennifer. This is Susan and Patricia. We're from the Riverside Bend Women's Community Group." Maya's stomach tightened. She knew a delegation when she saw one. "Nice to meet you," she said warily. "We wanted to welcome you to town," Jennifer continued, "and just express a few concerns about your living situation." "Concerns?" Maya repeated. "It's just that a treehouse isn't really a suitable place to raise a child," added Susan. She was shorter, rounder, with a severe expression. "We're worried about safety, and frankly, your judgment." Maya gripped the railing, forcing her voice to remain calm. "The structure is sound. I'm an architect. I know what I'm doing." "You were an architect," Patricia corrected. She was tall and thin, with sharp features and even sharper eyes. "We heard you lost your job, and your marriage, and custody of your daughter." The words hit her like physical blows. Maya felt the blood drain from her face. "I have joint custody, and my personal life is none of your business." "It becomes our business when you put a child in our community at risk," Jennifer said, her tone syrupy with false concern. We've already spoken to the school principal and to county services. Someone will be by to do a home visit. A home visit? Maya said, stunned. It's for your own good, Susan chirped. For the child's safety. They left without another word, melting back down the trail as if they had just delivered a message from on high. Maya stood frozen, her hands trembling, rage and fear warring in her chest. They were going to try to take Iris. These self-righteous women who didn't know her, who knew nothing but gossip and judgment, were going to try to take the only good thing she had left. She went back inside and sat on the floor, her head in her hands. For a long moment she let the despair wash over her, the crushing weight of being alone, judged, and hunted. Then she lifted her head and looked around the treehouse. She would fight. She had lost everything else, but she would not lose this. She would not lose Iris. If they wanted to inspect her home, fine. She would make it immaculate. She would prove the structure was safe. She would show them that being poor and unconventional did not make her a bad mother. Maya stood up and went back to work with a renewed fury. She scrubbed every surface until it shone. She organized their meager belongings into neat piles. She tested the bridge supports, tightened loose boards, and checked every nail and joint. By the time she had to go down to meet Iris's bus, the treehouse looked almost normal, almost like a home. Iris came running when she saw Maya, her backpack bouncing. "How was school, sweetie?" Maya asked, kneeling to hug her. Iris's face fell. "Some of the kids were mean. They said we live in a fort for homeless people." Maya closed her eyes for a beat, then forced a smile. "Do you like living in our treehouse?" "I love it," Iris said. "It's like we're birds." "Then that's all that matters," Maya said. "What other people think doesn't change what we know is true." They walked back up the trail together, Iris chattering about her teacher, who seemed nice, and the library, which had a whole shelf of books she wanted to read. Maya listened, holding her daughter's hand, trying not to think about home visits and judgmental neighbors and all the ways this new life could still fall apart. That night, after Iris was asleep, Maya sat by the fire again with her notebook. She couldn't shake the feeling that the treehouse was hiding something. The inconsistencies in its construction weren't accidents. They were intentional. Someone had built hidden spaces into this structure, and Maya needed to know why. She ran her hands over the bookshelf again, pressing on every panel, feeling for latches or hinges. Nothing. She examined the floorboard by the hearth, the one that gave under pressure. Kneeling, she ran her fingers along its edges, searching for a catch. It was fitted tightly, but not nailed down, more like it was wedged into place. Using a butter knife from the kitchen, she gently pried at the edge. The board lifted slightly. Her heart began to pound. She worked the knife around the perimeter, loosening it bit by bit, until finally the board came free. Beneath it was darkness. Maya grabbed her flashlight and aimed it into the opening. There was a space maybe 10 inches deep, running under several of the floorboards. And inside that space something glinted. She reached in carefully, her fingers brushing against cool metal. She pulled out a small tin box, the kind that might have once held biscuits or tea. It was rusted at the corners but otherwise intact. Her hands shook as she set it on the floor and carefully worked the lid open. Inside were papers, photographs, letters, and a small, leather-bound journal with a name embossed on the cover in faded gold leaf. Julienne Thorne. Maya held her breath. The name meant something, something important. She'd heard it before, somewhere in her studies, in some lecture on influential architects, but she couldn't place it. She opened the journal carefully. The first page was dated May 15th, 1973. The handwriting was small, precise, beautiful. If you are reading this, then I have either succeeded or I have failed spectacularly. Either way, know this. This treehouse is my true work, not the buildings that made me famous, not the designs they lauded and copied and commercialized. This, my sanctuary, my laboratory, my masterpiece. Maya's hands trembled as she turned the page. She had found something, something important, something that might explain why this treehouse existed, why it was built with such care and hidden like a secret. Outside, the wind picked up, making the treehouse sway gently. The trees sang their ancient song, and Maya sat in the firelight, reading the words of a man who had vanished 40 years ago, slowly realizing she hadn't just bought a treehouse. She had bought a mystery that would change everything. Maya barely slept that first week. Every night, after Iris was asleep in the loft, she sat by the fire and devoured Julian Thorne's journal. The entries were sporadic, jumping from philosophical observations on architecture to technical notes on load distribution, from poetry about life among the trees to bitter commentary on the world of commercial architecture he had left behind. But one thing became clear. Julian Thorne was no eccentric hermit. He was a visionary who had walked away from fame to build something pure. The treehouse became their rhythm. Morning came with sunlight filtering through the canopy, birdsong replacing alarm clocks. Maya always woke first. She would rekindle the embers of the overnight fire, then boil water for instant coffee and oatmeal. Iris would climb down from the loft, still in her pajamas, and they would eat breakfast together, watching the mist rise from the riverbank below. The view never grew old. From their perch 30 feet in the air, they could see the water carving its way through the valley, the mountains rising beyond it, the entire world spread out like a painting. But to leave their sanctuary was to face reality. Every morning, Maya walked Iris across the swaying rope bridge to the school bus stop. And every morning, she felt the stares. The townspeople would watch, their gazes fixed but unmoving, never offering a wave. The children whispered and pointed. The bus driver, a burly man named Earl with a thick mustache, would give a slight shake of his head each time Iris stepped aboard, as if witnessing child endangerment in real time. "How was school?" Maya would ask each afternoon when Iris returned. "Fine," Iris would say, but her eyes told other stories. Stories of children who wouldn't sit with her at lunch, of girls who called her Tree Girl and asked if she relieved herself in the woods, of a teacher who asked in front of the whole class if she had running water at home. But Iris was stronger than Maya could have imagined. Where other children might have wilted under the scorn of their peers, Iris seemed to draw strength from her isolation. She brought home leaves and pine cones, creating elaborate nature collages on the treehouse floor. She scrambled through the branches surrounding their home with a fearless confidence, moving through the canopy as if she were born to it. One evening, Maya found her daughter perched on a high branch, legs dangling, reading a book as casually as if she were on a park bench. "Be careful," Maya called up, her heart leaping into her throat. "I am," Iris said, not looking down. "The trees tell me which branches are safe." Maya held her tongue. She didn't scold her. Perhaps this was what a childhood was meant to be. Wild, connected, and brave. Free from overprotection, schedules, and fear. The town of Riverside Bend, however, remained unimpressed. 2 weeks after they moved in, a woman from County Child Protective Services appeared. Her name was Margaret Simmons, and she carried a clipboard, wore sensible shoes, and had an expression that suggested she'd already made up her mind. Maya led her across the bridge, watching the woman grip the rope handrails with white knuckles. Inside, Margaret surveyed everything with narrowed eyes. She checked the smoke detectors Maya had installed, tested the camp stove, eyed the composting toilet with poorly disguised revulsion, and asked blunt questions about heating, insulation, and fire exits. Maya answered each one calmly, professionally, producing her architectural credentials and the structural engineering reports she had written herself, explaining load capacities and safety margins. "And where does the child sleep?" Margaret asked. "In the loft," Maya said, pointing upward. Margaret trudged up the ladder, breathing heavily. She inspected Iris's mattress, her stuffed animals arranged neatly, and the fairy lights Maya had strung along the rafters, powered by a small solar battery. "And if there's a fire? How does she get down?" "There's a rope ladder that drops from the loft straight to the ground," Maya explained. "It meets fire code. Custom made by an artist, I presume, and highly irregular," Margaret said, climbing back down. "Irregular is not illegal," Maya said softly. "My daughter is fed, clothed, educated, and loved. She is safe. That's what matters." Margaret made a note on her clipboard. "I'll file my report. You can expect someone to follow up." After she left, Maya sank to the floor and let herself tremble. They were trying to find a reason to take Iris from her. She could feel the pressure mounting, the town's judgment solidifying into action. She had to prove them all wrong. She had to make this work. Money became the next crisis. Maya's savings evaporated within 3 weeks. She needed work, but Riverside Bend wasn't exactly a hotbed of architectural opportunity. The town had one small construction company, Henderson Building, run by a man in his 60s named Tom Henderson. Maya walked into his office on a Tuesday morning, resume in hand. Tom looked her over with skeptical eyes. He had the build of a bulldog, short and broad, with calloused hands and a permanent dusting of sawdust on his flannel shirt. "You're the woman living in that crazy treehouse," he said. It wasn't a question. "I'm also an architect," Maya replied. "So I've heard." He glanced at her resume without interest. "Don't need an architect. I need framers, roofers, someone who knows their way around a miter saw." "I can do that," Maya said. "Ever worked a construction site?" "I've done my own renovations. I understand building from the ground up. Blueprints, load calculations, finishing work." Tom leaned back in his chair, studying her. "Most architects I've known couldn't hammer a nail straight to save their lives. Too busy drawing pretty pictures." "Try me," Maya said. "One day. If I can't do the work, you don't have to pay me." Something in her quiet desperation must have registered. Tom sighed. "Got a job starting tomorrow. An addition on the Paulson's place. Be there at 7. Bring your own tools if you have any." Maya showed up at 6:45 with a borrowed tool belt and a will of iron. The crew was 5 men, all local, all skeptical. They started her on grunt work, hauling lumber, cleaning up, fetching tools. She did it all without complaint, watching how they worked, learning their rhythm. On the 3rd day, Tom had her frame a window. She measured twice, cut once, and fit the pieces with a precision that made him raise an eyebrow. By the end of the week, she was working alongside them, and they had stopped making jokes about the architect playing carpenter. The work was brutal, physical in a way her office job had never been. Her hands blistered, then calloused. Her shoulders ached. She would arrive home after dark, muscles screaming, with just enough energy to make dinner for Iris, before collapsing into an exhausted sleep. But the paychecks, small as they were, kept them afloat. October gave way to November, and the temperatures dropped. Maya spent her evenings winterizing the treehouse. She sealed every crack with caulk and expanding foam, installed weather stripping around the door, hung heavy curtains over the windows, and stacked firewood under a tarp on the platform. The treehouse stayed surprisingly warm, warmer than it had any right to be. The walls seemed to hold the heat in a way that didn't quite make sense. One night, while stuffing insulation into a small gap she'd found under the kitchen counter, Maya discovered something strange. Behind the cabinet, the wall wasn't standard construction. Instead of 2x4s spaced 16 inches apart, there was something else. She pulled the cabinet out completely, shining a flashlight into the cavity. The wall was two-layered. There was the exterior wall she could see, and then, about 6 inches behind it, another wall. The gap between them was filled with some kind of dense, fibrous material. It wasn't modern insulation, but something older, organic. Straw, maybe, mixed with clay or paper pulp. Whatever it was, it explained the superior insulation. But why build a double wall? Why go to all that trouble? She thought of Julian's journal, still hidden beneath the loose floorboard. He had written about building within buildings, about spaces between spaces. At the time, she'd dismissed it as philosophical. Now she wondered if he'd meant it literally. Maya began to map the treehouse more carefully. She measured every room, every wall, every corner. She sketched it all in her notebook, comparing the interior dimensions to the exterior ones. The inconsistencies became obvious. The east wall was far too thick. The north corner had a dead space. The loft was smaller than the roof structure suggested. Everywhere she looked, she found missing square footage. It was during one of these measuring sessions that she met Dorothy. Maya was outside, using a tape measure to check the length of the exterior walls, when a voice called up from below. "You'll fall if you're not careful." She looked down to see an old woman standing at the base of the tree, one hand shielding her eyes from the sun. She had to be in her 70s or 80s, with white hair pinned in a loose bun and a face etched with a lifetime of wrinkles. She wore a bright purple coat, despite the chill, and leaned on a gnarled wooden cane. "I'm being careful," Maya called down. "That's what Julian used to say too." Maya's heart skipped. She scrambled down the ladder, hopping the last few feet to the ground. "You knew Julian Thorne?" The old woman smiled. "I'm Dorothy Whitmore. I live just a quarter-mile down the road. And yes, I knew Julian. Knew him very well, in fact." "Can you tell me about him?" Maya asked, trying to keep the eagerness out of her voice. "No one in town will talk about him. It's like he's been erased." Dorothy's expression clouded. "That's because most folks around here thought he was crazy. Dangerous, even. When he disappeared, they were mostly relieved. It was easier to forget." She looked up at the treehouse, her eyes distant. "But I remembered. Someone had to." "Would you like to come up?" Maya offered. "I can make tea." Dorothy let out a dry laugh. "Child, I'm 83 years old. I haven't climbed a rope bridge in 6 decades. But if you want to hear about Julian, you come visit me tomorrow afternoon. I'll have a pot of soup on." The next day was Sunday. Maya left Iris drawing in the treehouse and walked down the gravel road to Dorothy's place. It was a small cottage with a garden put to bed for the winter, and a curl of smoke rising from the chimney. Dorothy answered the door before Maya could knock. Come in," she said. "Soup's ready. I made cornbread." The house was cozy and cluttered in the way old homes often are. filled with books, knickknacks, and photographs covering every surface. Dorothy served the soup at a kitchen table scarred by decades of use, and they ate in companionable silence for a few minutes. Finally, Maya gathered the courage to ask, "How did you know Julian?" Dorothy dabbed her mouth with a napkin. "I was his assistant, back in the 70s, before he left his firm in Seattle. I was fresh out of secretarial school, and Julian needed someone to organize his chaos. He was brilliant, but scattered, could design a skyscraper in his head, but couldn't remember to pay his electric bill." "What was he like?" "Passionate," Dorothy said. "Obsessive. He believed architecture should be more than just functional. He wanted buildings that breathed, that adapted and grew with people. But the corporate world just wanted him to make them rich. They'd take his ideas and strip them down to the cheapest possible version. It broke his heart. So he left, in 1972. Yep. Walked away from a seven-figure contract and disappeared into these woods. Everyone thought he'd gone mad. But I understood. He needed to build something pure, something that couldn't be compromised or commercialized. So he built that treehouse." Maya leaned forward. "What do you know about its construction? About the hidden spaces?" Dorothy's eyes grew sharp. "You found them then?" "Some of them," Maya admitted. "But I don't understand why. Why build secret rooms into a treehouse?" Dorothy rose slowly and walked to a bookshelf. She pulled down a heavy photo album and brought it back to the table. Inside were black and white photographs from the 1970s. A younger Julian, lean and intense, with shoulder-length hair and eyes that seemed to burn through the camera. Photos of the treehouse in various stages of construction. And photos of a younger Dorothy herself, standing beside Julian, both of them smiling. "Julian believed that buildings could hold secrets," Dorothy said softly. "Not just physical secrets, but conceptual ones. He built that treehouse as a prototype for something revolutionary, affordable housing that worked with nature instead of against it. Structures that could be built almost anywhere, by anyone, using sustainable materials. He thought if he perfected the design, he could change the world." "What happened to him?" Dorothy's face fell. "I don't know. In 1984, he just vanished. Some people think he finally went off the deep end and wandered into the forest. Others think he had enemies, people from his old life who wanted his designs." She paused, her voice dropping lower. I think he found what he was looking for, and he moved on. But he left his work behind. He left it for someone who would understand." "Why didn't you tell anyone?" Maya asked. Dorothy looked directly at her, her old eyes clear and knowing. "Who was there to tell? Who would have listened? Until you." "Why did you keep it a secret?" Maya asked. "Because Julian made me promise," Dorothy said. "He said the world wasn't ready, that people would either destroy his work or exploit it. He wanted it to stay hidden until the right person came along, someone who needed it as much as it needed them." She reached across the table and gently touched Maya's hand. "I think that person might be you, dear." Tears welled in Maya's eyes. "I don't know if I'm the right person. I'm just trying to survive." "That's exactly why you are," Dorothy said. "Julian's work wasn't for the rich or the powerful. It was for people like you, people who needed shelter and hope and a second chance." They talked for 2 more hours. Dorothy showed her more photographs, telling her stories of Julian's theories and his dreams. When Maya finally left, she carried the borrowed photo album, with strict instructions to return it unharmed, and a head buzzing with possibilities. Back at the treehouse, Iris was where Maya had left her, now curled up by the fireplace. "Where'd you go?" "To visit a neighbor," Maya said. "Someone who knew the man who built our home." Iris looked up, her interest piqued. "What was he like?" "Magical," Maya said, a small smile on her face. "I think he was magical." That night, long after Iris had fallen asleep, Maya picked up Julian's journal again. She read it with a new understanding, seeing his words through the filter of Dorothy's stories. He wasn't just building a treehouse. He was building a manifesto in wood and stone. Every hidden space had a purpose. Every unusual feature was an innovation. The double-layered walls provided superior insulation using natural materials. The loft design maximized space while maintaining structural integrity. Even the suspension bridge was designed to sway with the wind rather than resist it, reducing strain on the anchor points. What happens next will turn this quiet night on its head, reveal a truth no one saw coming, and remind us why, sometimes, the quietest voices hold the most power. Stay tuned to find out what comes next. And if you're enjoying the story, please like, share, and subscribe for more. November bled into December, and the first snow fell. Iris stood on the platform, arms outstretched, catching flakes on her tongue. "It's like living in a snow globe," she said, and Maya had to agree. The treehouse in winter was a kind of magic. The trees held the snow on their branches like cotton batting, and the world below grew silent and soft. But winter also brought new challenges. The road became treacherous with ice. Getting to the bus stop meant carefully navigating slick paths. The fireplace became essential, not optional, and Maya spent hours each day tending it, feeding it logs, making sure they didn't freeze. Tom Henderson's work slowed as the weather made outdoor construction difficult. Money grew tight again. Maya started taking any odd job she could find. She fixed a neighbor's shed door, built custom shelves for the general store, and repaired a sagging deck. It wasn't enough to thrive, but it was enough to survive. Through it all, the treehouse held its secrets. Maya found more hidden compartments, a space behind the bathroom wall, a hollow above the ceiling beams. Each was empty, as if waiting to be filled. She began to suspect that Julian had designed the entire structure as a puzzle box, with layers of discovery built into its very frame. It was a storm in mid-December that finally revealed the truth. The forecast had called for heavy rain, but that was an understatement. The storm swept in from the coast with a biblical fury. The wind bent the trees nearly in half, and the rain fell in sheets so dense Maya couldn't see 10 feet past the windows. The treehouse swayed like a ship at sea, and for the first time since they'd moved in, Maya felt a prickle of fear. "Maya!" Iris called from the loft, her voice tight with fright. "It's okay, sweetie," Maya called back, though she wasn't entirely sure. "The trees know how to bend with the wind. We're safe." The power, minimal as it was from their small solar setup, went out within an hour. Maya lit candles and oil lamps. The fire crackled in the hearth, and shadows danced on the walls. Thunder shook the world. Lightning turned night into day in split-second bursts, and still, the treehouse held. It was around midnight when Maya heard a crack like a gunshot, followed by a tremendous tearing sound. Something had come down. A branch. Or maybe an entire tree. She rushed to the window but could see nothing in the dark and the driving rain. Then she noticed the water. It was seeping down the eastern wall near the bookshelf. a dark stain spreading across the wood. Maya grabbed towels and pressed them against the leak, but it was no use. The water kept coming, trickling down the wall in rivulets. "Stay in the loft!" she shouted up to Iris. "Don't come down!" She pulled the bookshelf away from the wall, books tumbling to the floor. Behind it, she could see the damage. A section of the exterior wall had been cracked open, likely by a falling branch, and water was pouring in. But as she examined the crack in the lamplight, she saw something else. The wall wasn't just broken, it was opening. The crack revealed a seam she had never noticed before, and the pressure of the water was forcing it wider. Maya grabbed a crowbar from her toolbox and, acting on pure instinct, pried at the seam. The panel gave way with a groaning screech. Behind it was darkness. Not just the darkness of a wall cavity, but the darkness of a room. The darkness of space. Maya shone her flashlight into the opening and gasped. It was a doorway. Behind the bookshelf, so perfectly hidden that she had walked past it 100 times without a clue, was a door to another room. A secret room. The hidden space she had been looking for all along. Her heart pounded as she widened the opening. The panel had been engineered to look like a solid wall, with the books and shelves camouflaging the seams. But once you knew it was there, you could see the hinges, the clever mechanism that held it shut, the way it was all designed to be invisible. Beyond the door, her flashlight beam illuminated something impossible. The secret room was larger than she could have imagined, maybe 10 by 15 feet, with a low ceiling and walls lined with shelves and cabinets. And on those shelves were hundreds of rolled-up papers, blueprints, drawings, models, an entire life's work, hidden away like treasure. Maya stepped inside. Her wet clothes were forgotten, the storm forgotten, everything forgotten except this moment of discovery. The room smelled of old paper and cedar. Her hands trembled as she unrolled the first blueprint. It was a design for a compact, elegant housing unit built around a central tree. The next was similar but different, adapted for hillsides, another for wetlands, another for desert climates. She unrolled design after design, each one more brilliant than the last. Julian hadn't just built a treehouse. He had used it to prototype an entire philosophy of sustainable architecture. Every hidden space in the main house corresponded to a design innovation. The double walls, the natural insulation, the water collection system she'd never noticed, the way the structure worked, with the trees instead of against them. It was all here, documented in meticulous detail. And then she found the letter. It was in an envelope marked, "For whoever comes next," in Julian's distinctive handwriting. Maya opened it with trembling fingers. "If you have found this room, then you have earned what is inside it. These designs are my life's work. They represent everything I believe about how humans should live in harmony with the natural world. I hid them because the world was not ready, because people would have destroyed them, or trivialized them, or turned them into profit instead of progress. But maybe you are different. Maybe you are someone who understands that architecture is not about ego or money. It is about shelter and dignity and giving people a place to belong. If you are that person, then take these plans, build them, share them, improve upon them. The treehouse you are living in is the proof of concept. Every innovation I have designed is tested within these walls. The construction methods, the materials, the systems that make it all work. And it is all functional, affordable, and possible. I may be gone, but the work remains. Do not let it die in the dark. Bring it into the light. Maya sat on the floor of the secret room, surrounded by 40 years of hidden genius, and she wept. She wept for Julian, who had sacrificed everything to protect his vision. She wept for herself, for the architect she had been, and the carpenter she had become. She wept for Iris, sleeping soundly upstairs while history was being rewritten below. And she wept with something that felt like joy, because she had found it, the answer to why this treehouse existed, why she had been drawn to it, why everything in her life had fallen apart just to lead her here. Outside, the storm still raged, but inside, in a secret room that had waited 40 years to be discovered, Maya Hartwell held the blueprints to change the world, and she finally understood what it meant to have a purpose. The next morning, the storm was a pale, exhausted thing, as if the world itself needed to rest. Maya hadn't slept. She had spent the entire night in the secret room, reading by the light of a flashlight and an oil lamp, unrolling plan after plan. Her architect's brain struggled to process the sheer scale of what she had found. Iris patted down from the loft at dawn, rubbing the sleep from her eyes. "Mom, are you still awake?" Maya looked up from a design for modular tree dwellings that could be connected like pieces of a puzzle. Her eyes were rimmed with exhaustion, but her mind was electric. "Sweetheart, come see this." Iris slipped through the hidden doorway, her small frame fitting easily through the opening Maya had pried open. The little girl's eyes went wide as she took in the secret room. "Whoa, it's like a treasure cave." "It is a treasure," Maya said softly. "Just not the kind most people would recognize." They sat together on the floor, surrounded by decades of work. Maya explained it as best she could, translating architectural concepts into a language a 7-year-old could understand. "The man who built our house, he invented new ways to build homes, ways that don't hurt the earth, ways that let people who don't have much money have beautiful, safe places to live." "Like us," Iris said. "Like us," Maya agreed, a lump forming in her throat. "He hid it all here, waiting for someone to find it." Iris beamed with pride. "And you found it. Because you're an architect, too." Maya pulled her daughter close. "We found it. It's ours now, yours and mine, and we have to decide what to do with it." For the next week, Maya was obsessed. She cataloged every blueprint, every drawing, every note Julian had left behind. There were 73 complete housing designs, each adapted for different climates and terrains. Tree houses, yes, but also earth-bermed homes, houses on stilts, structures that used recycled materials and passive solar heating. Each design was accompanied by detailed construction notes and materials lists, cost estimates from the 1970s that would need updating. But they proved these weren't fanciful dreams. They were buildable, practical, and revolutionary. She also found more journals, tucked into drawers and hidden in sealed tubes. Julian's voice came through on the pages, passionate, frustrated, and brilliant. He was born in 1938 in rural Montana, the son of a carpenter and a schoolteacher. He'd studied architecture at the University of Washington on a scholarship, graduating in 1961, and had quickly made a name for himself designing innovative commercial buildings in Seattle. By the late 1960s, he was famous. His buildings won awards. Magazines featured his work. Wealthy clients vied for his services. But Julian had become disillusioned. In a journal entry from 1971, he wrote, "They take my designs and they gut them. They strip out everything innovative, everything alive, everything that costs an extra dollar. Then they slap my name on the hollowed-out corpse and call it progress. I am complicit in the lie. I am helping rich people get richer while the world burns, and poor people can't afford a roof over their heads. I can't do this anymore. He walked away from a $300,000 contract, a fortune in 1972, and disappeared into the forests of Oregon. The architectural world was shocked. Some called it a breakdown. Others called it a publicity stunt. Most simply moved on, forgot, and filled the void he left with the next rising star. But Julian hadn't broken down. He had built. For 12 years, from 1972 to 1984, he lived in this treehouse and created the most important work of his life. Work no one even knew existed. Maya sat at her kitchen table, surrounded by notebooks where she'd been sketching and running numbers. The designs weren't just beautiful, they were practical. A family of 4 could live in one of Julian's treehouses for a material cost of less than $15,000 in modern currency. His construction techniques required little more than human hands and simple tools, meaning they could be erected in the most remote areas. They utilized renewable resources, collected rainwater, and generated their own power through small solar panels and micro-hydro turbines. They were everything modern, sustainable architecture aspired to be, designed 40 years before it became a trend. This could change everything, Maya whispered to the empty room. But who would believe her? She was a disgraced architect living in a treehouse, a joke in her community, barely scraping by. If she walked into a developer's office or a city planning meeting with Julian's blueprints, they would laugh her out of the building. She needed credibility. She needed proof. She needed help. Her thoughts turned to Dorothy. The old woman had known Julian, had worked with him, had kept his secrets for decades. Maya bundled herself against the December chill and walked down the path to Dorothy's cabin. The older woman opened the door before Maya could even knock, as if she had been waiting. "You found the room," Dorothy said. It wasn't a question. "The storm broke through the wall. There are blueprints, journals, decades of work." Dorothy's eyes welled with tears. "I wondered if they were still there. I haven't been able to climb up to check in years. Come in, child. We have a great deal to discuss." Over tea at Dorothy's kitchen table, the full story emerged. Dorothy had been more than Julian's assistant. She was his collaborator, his sounding board, his closest friend. When he left Seattle, she had followed, taking an early retirement to help him with his life's work. For 12 years, she had lived in a small cabin on what was now her property, running supplies to Julian, helping him test designs, and documenting everything. "Why did he disappear?" Maya asked. "The journals just stopped in 1984. Dorothy's face grew grim. "Because they found him. A development company called Cascade Holdings. They were buying up land in this area for a massive resort project. Julian's property was right in the middle of their plans, and he refused to sell. They offered him money, a lot of it, but he said no. The treehouse was his laboratory. He couldn't abandon it." "What happened?" "They got aggressive. Men in suits started showing up making threats. Then it escalated. Equipment failures, mysterious fires in the woods near his supply drops. Julian started getting paranoid. He said they were watching him. I thought maybe he was imagining things. But then someone broke into my cabin, tore the place apart looking for something. That's when Julian decided to hide everything. The secret room was his insurance policy. And then he vanished," Maya said. Dorothy nodded slowly. "January 15th, 1985. He was going to confront Cascade Holdings directly, said he had proof they were behind the harassment. I begged him not to go, but Julian could be stubborn. He never came back. The police investigated and found nothing. No body, no evidence of foul play, nothing. Eventually, they declared him missing and closed the case. Do you think Cascade killed him? I think they made him go away, Dorothy said. Whether that meant killing him or paying him off to disappear, I don't know. But Julian would never have abandoned his work willingly. Never. Maya felt a chill, despite the warm kitchen. Is Cascade Holdings still around? Oh yes, Dorothy said darkly. They never built the resort. Environmental regulations killed the project in the late 80s. But the company is still active, still buying up property, still operating in the Pacific Northwest. They've tried to buy Julian's land a dozen times over the years. Made offers on my property too. I've refused them every time. They know about the treehouse. They know something is there, Dorothy corrected. But they don't know what. The property has been in legal limbo for so long. They probably assumed whatever Julian built had rotted away. When you bought it, I'm sure they took notice. As if summoned by their conversation, a sharp knock echoed from Dorothy's front door. The old woman's face went pale. I'm not expecting anyone. Maya stood and peered through the window. A black SUV was parked in the drive. A man in an expensive coat stood on the porch, holding a briefcase. He knocked again, harder this time. Dorothy clutched Maya's arm. Don't answer it. But the man called out, Mrs. Whitmore? I know you're in there. I just want to talk about a business opportunity. Maya made a split-second decision. She pulled the door open, facing the man with her chin held high. Dorothy isn't interested in whatever you're selling. The man looked surprised to see her. Then, his expression shifted to one of recognition. You must be Maya Hartwell, the new owner of the Thorn property. It's just a treehouse, Maya said. Ah, but we both know it's more than that, don't we? The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. My name is Richard Vance. I'm a land acquisition specialist with Cascade Holdings. I'd like to discuss purchasing both your property and Mrs. Whitmore's. We're prepared to offer very generous terms. Not interested, Maya said, moving to close the door. Vance's hand shot out, blocking it. Ms. Hartwell, I don't think you understand your situation. You're living in a structure that is likely not up to code. You have a child in an environment that could be deemed unsafe. County services have already been made aware of concerns. It would be a shame if those concerns were to escalate. It's so much easier to just sell, take the money, and move somewhere more suitable. The threat was unmistakable. Maya felt a hot surge of rage. Are you threatening my daughter? I'm offering a solution, Vance said smoothly. $750,000 for your 3 acres. More than generous for an empty lot with a derelict structure. You could buy a real house, give your daughter a normal life. Get off this property. Dorothy's voice came from behind Maya, sharp as broken glass. And don't come back. Vance's smile turned icy. You're both making a mistake. Cascade Holdings doesn't give up when it wants something. We have resources, connections, and patience. You'll sell eventually. Everyone does. He pressed a business card into Maya's hand. When you're ready to be reasonable, give me a call. He walked back to his SUV and drove away, leaving them standing in the doorway. Maya's hands were shaking with anger and fear. She glanced down at the card. Richard Vance, Senior Acquisition Specialist, Cascade Holdings. They're coming for it, Maya said. They've been coming for it for 40 years, Dorothy replied. They haven't won yet. But Maya could see the worry in the old woman's eyes. Cascade had resources. They had lawyers, money, and apparently no scruples. What did Maya have? A treehouse full of blueprints nobody knew existed, and a history of losing everything she'd ever fought for. That night, Maya sat in the secret room, reading more of Julian's journals by lamplight. She found an entry from December 1984, just weeks before he disappeared. They're closing in. I can feel it. Vance was here again today. Said Cascade would make my life a living hell if I don't sell. Said accidents happen out in these woods. That it would be tragic if something happened to Dorothy or me. I've hidden everything that matters. If they get the land, they won't get the work. That's what's important. The work survives. Someone will find it someday. Someone who needs it. Like I did. Someone who will know what to do with it. Maya closed the journal, looking around the secret room. Julian had built this place as a fortress, a vault, a time capsule. He knew he might not survive to share his vision, so he hid it where only someone who truly understood his architecture would find it. Someone desperate enough to buy a crazy old treehouse. Someone stubborn enough to stay, despite the ridicule. Someone who would investigate the inconsistencies, the odd measurements, the hidden spaces. He had hidden it for someone like her. The realization hit her like a physical blow. This wasn't just about preserving Julian's work. It was about finishing it, taking his revolutionary designs and bringing them to the world. It was about proving that affordable, sustainable housing was possible, about changing the conversation around poverty and shelter and dignity. But she couldn't do it alone. She needed allies, support, credibility. She needed people to believe in what Julian had created. And she needed to move fast before Cascade Holdings found a way to take it all away. For the next 3 days, Maya photographed every blueprint, every journal page, every scrap of paper in the secret room. She uploaded everything to cloud storage, made multiple backups, and hid physical copies in different locations. If Cascade came for the originals, the work would at least survive digitally. Then she started reaching out. She contacted old professors from architecture school, the ones who had believed in her before David's family had destroyed her reputation. She sent emails to sustainable housing nonprofits, to environmental groups, to anyone she thought might care about affordable housing solutions. Most didn't reply. A few sent polite rejections. But some, a few crucial ones, responded with interest. One name kept coming up in her research. Professor Helena Vasquez at Portland State University. She had written extensively on sustainable architecture and housing inequity. Maya sent her a carefully worded email, not revealing too much, but hinting at the discovery of significant historical architectural documents related to Julian Thorne. The reply came within hours. Julian Thorne, I wrote my dissertation on his early work. He vanished in the 80s. You're saying you found something of his? I need to see this, immediately. They arranged to meet at a cafe in Portland. Maya took a day off from the diner, promising Tom Henderson she'd make up the hours. She borrowed Dorothy's car, not trusting her own truck for the 2-hour drive. Iris stayed with Dorothy, who had offered to teach her how to bake bread. Professor Vasquez was in her 50s, with black hair streaked with silver and intense dark eyes. She arrived carrying a battered leather satchel, a look of barely suppressed excitement on her face. Maya brought one of Julian's journals and a selection of blueprints, carefully chosen to show the scope of his work without revealing everything. Helena's hands trembled as she examined the documents. My God, she whispered. This is his handwriting. These are original designs I've never seen before. Where did you find these? Maya took a deep breath. I bought a property that used to belong to him. The treehouse he built in the 70s. They were hidden inside. Hidden? Helena repeated. For 40 years. There's more, Maya said. 73 complete housing designs, journals spanning 12 years, construction notes, materials lists, cost analyses. It's his entire post-commercial career, documented and preserved. Helena looked up, her eyes shining with unshed tears. Do you understand what this means? Julian Thorne was a visionary. His disappearance was one of the great mysteries of 20th century architecture. If this work exists, if it's as comprehensive as you say, it could redefine how we think about sustainable, affordable housing. I know, Maya said, but there's a problem. A development company, Cascade Holdings, has been trying to buy the land. They've threatened me. They said they'd use county services to take my daughter if I don't sell. I think they're the reason Julian disappeared. Helena's expression hardened. Cascade Holdings. I know the name. They've been involved in a number of controversial developments. They have a reputation for using aggressive tactics. She closed the journal carefully. You need legal protection, and you need to get this public, fast. Once the academic community knows this work exists, it will be much harder for Cascade to make it disappear. I don't have money for lawyers, Maya admitted. I can barely make ends meet. Leave that to me, Helena said. I have contacts. There are nonprofits that provide legal aid in preservation cases, and I know journalists who would kill for this story. A missing architect's hidden masterpiece discovered by a single mother living in his treehouse. This is national news. Maya felt a surge of hope, mingled with fear. Going public meant exposure, judgment, scrutiny, but it also meant protection. Cascade couldn't make her disappear if the whole world was watching. There's one more thing, Maya said. I'm an architect, too. Or I was. I lost my license, my job, everything in a divorce. But I understand Julian's work. I can see how brilliant it is, how these revolutionary designs could actually work. They could be built today, right now, and solve problems we're still wrestling with. Helena watched her, her gaze piercing. What's your name? Maya. Maya Hartwell. Maya Hartwell, Helena repeated, as if committing it to memory. Would you be willing to present this work, to speak publicly about what you've found? I'm a nobody, Maya said. I'm just a woman living in a treehouse who got lucky. You are the person Julian Thorne's work chose, Helena corrected. That doesn't make you a nobody. It makes you essential. You found it. You preserved it. You saw what it was worth, Helena said, her voice cutting through Maya's uncertainty. That makes you the only person who can bring it to the world. She leaned forward, her eyes bright with purpose. I'm organizing a symposium on sustainable housing. In March. Every major architect, developer, and policymaker in the Pacific Northwest will be there. I want you to present Julian's work. I want you to show them what's possible. Maya's heart hammered against her ribs. I can't. I'm not qualified. I don't have the credentials. You have something better, Helena insisted. You have the work itself, and you have a story people will listen to. The discredited architect who found redemption in a treehouse, the single mother who unearthed a treasure, the guardian of a dead man's dream. Helena's gaze was intense. That story has power, Maya. Use it. The drive back to Riverside felt surreal. Maya's mind was a whirlwind of possibility and fear, a symposium, going public, facing Cascade Holdings. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. She stopped at Dorothy's to pick up Iris, and found them both covered in flour, laughing over a slightly lopsided loaf of bread. "We made it ourselves," Iris announced proudly. Dorothy looked at Maya's face and knew instantly that something had shifted. After Iris ran outside to play in the snow, Dorothy asked what had happened. Maya told her everything about Helena Vasquez, the symposium, the plan to take Julian's work public. Dorothy listened in silence, her wrinkled hands clasped on the table. "Julian would have liked you," she said finally. "He always said the work would find its way into the right hands. I think he was right." "I'm terrified," Maya admitted, her voice a whisper. "Cascade has power, money, lawyers. What if they find a way to take it all?" Dorothy reached across the table and took Maya's hand in her own. "Then we fight. I'm too old to be scared. And you? You're stronger than you think. You've survived this far. You've protected that child. You kept Julian's work safe without even knowing what it was. That takes either courage or stupidity. Sometimes they're the same thing," Maya said with a weak laugh. Dorothy's answering smile was all the reassurance she needed. That night, back in the treehouse, Maya stood in the secret room, surrounded by Julian's legacy. She thought of the man who had built this place, who had sacrificed fame and fortune to create something pure. He had hidden his life's work and then vanished, trusting that somehow, someday, it would matter. She thought of herself a year ago, standing in a divorce lawyer's office, losing everything she had built. How impossible it had seemed that life could ever be more than just survival. And she thought of Iris, asleep in the loft, thriving in this treehouse against all odds, growing strong and brave and wild, proof that unconventional didn't mean wrong. Maya pulled out her phone and took a photo of the secret room. The shelves were filled with rolled blueprints, decades of innovation waiting to be shared. She posted the picture to social media with a simple caption. "Sometimes the most important work happens in secret. Sometimes it takes 40 years to be found." This is the hidden legacy of architect Julian Thorne, and it's about to change everything. By morning, the post had been shared 3,000 times. By afternoon, reporters were calling. By evening, the story was national news. The hidden masterpiece of a vanished architect. The single mom who found a fortune in blueprints. The treehouse that kept a secret for 4 decades. And somewhere in a corporate high-rise, Richard Vance of Cascade Holdings was discovering that the property he'd threatened to seize had just become the most famous treehouse in America, which meant taking it quietly had just become impossible. Maya stood on her deck, watching the sunset paint the winter sky in shades of orange and gold. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could actually win this fight. Because she wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for Julian's vision, for Dorothy's loyalty, for Iris's future, and for every person who had ever been told that beautiful, sustainable, affordable housing was impossible. The blueprints proved otherwise, and now the world was going to see them. The morning after the story broke, she awoke to find 17 television news vans parked along the dirt road leading to the treehouse. Reporters with cameras and microphones swarmed at the base of the trees, shouting questions up at the deck where she stood. Her phone had died overnight from the constant notifications, and when she plugged it in, it immediately began to buzz like an angry hornet. "Who are all those people?" Iris asked, peeking through the window. Maya's stomach churned with anxiety. This was what she wanted, wasn't it? Attention. Protection through visibility. But she hadn't expected it to be so fast, so overwhelming. "They want to know about the treehouse," she said, her voice calmer than she felt. "About what we found." She carefully pulled on her cleanest pair of jeans and the flannel shirt that made her feel most like someone who knew what they were doing. Then she descended to face the chaos. The moment her feet hit the ground, questions flew at her. "Ms. Hartwell, is it true you discovered lost architectural plans worth millions? How did you know where to look? What was your relationship with Julian Thorne? Do you intend to sell the blueprints?" Maya held up her hands, and the crowd quieted slightly. "I'll make one statement, but then I need you all to leave. This is private property, and my daughter has school," she said, keeping her voice as steady as she could. She explained it as simply as possible. How she'd bought the property, found the hidden room, discovered Julian's work. She stressed that she wasn't selling anything, that the designs were meant to be shared, not hoarded, that Julian had wanted them to help people who needed affordable housing. "But you could be sitting on tens of millions of dollars," a reporter insisted. "These are historically significant documents. Museums would pay a fortune." "They are not for sale," Maya said firmly. "Julian Thorne didn't hide his work so someone could profit from it. He hid it so it would survive until the time was right. That time is now." A reporter from the local paper, the Riverside Bend Gazette, a woman named Cheryl whom Maya recognized from the grocery store, asked, "Do you plan to stay in the treehouse? There have been concerns about whether it's a suitable home for a child." Maya looked directly into the camera. "This treehouse is the safest, most thoughtfully designed home my daughter and I have ever lived in. It was built by a genius who understood that housing should work with nature, not against it. We are not leaving." The press conference, if you could call it that, lasted 20 minutes. Then Maya politely but firmly asked everyone to leave. A few lingered, but then Tom Henderson pulled up with two of his construction crew, and their silent, sturdy presence was enough to encourage the stragglers to pack up. Tom walked over to Maya after the last van had rattled away. "You're the talk of the town this morning," he said, a grin playing on his lips. Maya braced herself. "I know it seems crazy." "It seems brave," Tom interrupted. "It takes guts to stand up to Cascade Holdings. They've been pushing people around this county for decades." He paused, adjusting his tool belt. "That offer still stands, by the way. The one about you teaching me some of these sustainable building techniques. Because if you're planning on building any of those designs, I want in." Maya felt tears well in her eyes. "Really?" "Really," Tom said. "I've been building houses the same way for 40 years. Maybe it's time I learned something new." In the week that followed, the story exploded. The national networks picked it up. Architecture magazines ran retrospectives on Julian Thorne's early career, speculating on what his hidden designs might hold. Helena Vasquez appeared on morning shows, explaining the historical significance. And through it all, Maya's phone never stopped ringing. But neither did Cascade Holdings. 3 days after the story broke, Maya received a certified letter. It was from a Seattle law firm representing Cascade. They claimed that Julian Thorne's work had been created while he was under contract with companies they had since acquired, making the blueprints their intellectual property. They demanded immediate access to the treehouse and all documents within, or they would seek a court order. Maya called Helena in a panic. Can they do that? Can they just claim it's theirs? They can try, Helena said, her voice steely. But intellectual property law is tricky, especially for work created over 40 years ago by someone who is legally deceased. I'm connecting you with a lawyer who specializes in this. Her name is Sarah Chen, and she's a shark. Sarah Chen was indeed a shark. She was sharp in her 30s and deeply offended by Cascade's business practices. She took Maya's case pro bono, calling it a matter of cultural preservation and housing justice. Within 2 days, she had filed a formal response, arguing that Julian had created the designs after leaving his commercial contracts, that he had explicitly hidden them to prevent corporate exploitation, and that Maya, as the legal owner of the property, had every right to its contents. This is going to get ugly, Sarah warned over a video call. Cascade doesn't want these plans out there because they prove affordable, sustainable housing is possible. That threatens their entire business model of building cheap, cookie-cutter subdivisions. They're going to fight this tooth and nail. Let them fight, Maya said, surprised by the firmness in her own voice. The town of Riverside Bend began to shift, like tectonic plates moving beneath the surface. At first, it was subtle. People stopped crossing the street when they saw Maya in town. The cashier at the general store met her eyes again. Then it became more obvious. A woman approached her in the post office parking lot. "I'm sorry," she said. She was young, maybe 30, with a baby on her hip. "I was one of the people who judged you, who thought you were crazy for living in that treehouse with your daughter. But I saw you on TV and I realized you weren't crazy. You were just braver than the rest of us." More apologies followed. The mothers from the community group showed up at Dorothy's house with a basket of muffins and shame-faced expressions. Jennifer, who had led the charge against her months before, spoke for them. "We were wrong," she said simply. "We thought we were protecting the community, but we were just being small-minded. What you've done sharing these plans, trying to help people, that's community service. We're sorry." Maya accepted the apology, though a part of her wanted to remind them how quickly they had turned, how willing they had been to call social services. But grace, she was learning, was more powerful than a grudge. "Thank you," she said. "That means a lot." The school changed, too. Iris came home one afternoon, beaming. "Mom, my teacher asked me to do a presentation on our house. She said it's historically important." The same teacher who had once pointedly asked if they had running water now wanted a presentation. Maya helped her daughter put together a simple slideshow with photos of the treehouse, images of Julian's blueprints, and drawings Iris had made of her favorite features. The presentation was supposed to be 10 minutes long. The class asked so many questions, it ran for 45. The kids who had called her Tree Girl as an insult now asked if they could come over to see the secret room. Parents who had whispered about child endangerment asked for tours. Tom Henderson hired Maya full-time as his sustainable design consultant. Her first project was to design a small, low-income housing development commissioned by the county. Instead of the standard box-like units Tom usually built, Maya adapted one of Julian's designs, creating homes clustered around a central green space with shared gardens, solar panels, and rainwater collection systems. The county planning board nearly rejected it for being too unconventional. But Helena Vasquez swept into the meeting with a presentation on long-term cost savings and environmental impact. The board approved it unanimously, but Cascade Holdings wasn't giving up. In February, Richard Vance returned. This time, he brought 3 other men in expensive suits and a briefcase full of documents. Maya met them on the ground, refusing to let them up into the treehouse. Dorothy stood beside her, and Tom Henderson stood nearby, arms crossed, looking imposing. "Ms. Hartwell," Richard began, his smile rehearsed and empty, "we've been reviewing the property records and discovered something interesting. The original survey of this land, from 1972, contains an error. The eastern boundary is actually 15 feet further west than your deed indicates." He paused for effect. "This means a portion of your treehouse, including the deck and the bridge, is built on land that legally belongs to the adjacent parcel." The blood drained from Maya's face. "What adjacent parcel?" Richard's smile widened. "The one Cascade Holdings purchased in 1983. We've been very patient, Ms. Hartwell, but technically, you're trespassing. You have 30 days to remove the encroaching structures, or we will seek a court order to have them removed." "That treehouse has been there for 50 years, Tom grumbled. "Adverse possession in Oregon only requires a 7-year claim, which would apply if Maya Hartwell had lived here that long." Richard cut in. "But she's only owned the property for 4 months. The clock resets with new ownership." Sarah Chen filed an emergency motion to stay any action while the survey discrepancy was investigated. But that meant more legal fees, more stress, more gnawing uncertainty. Maya lay awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering if Cascade would find a way to destroy the treehouse completely. If they couldn't have Julian's designs, perhaps they'd rather see the whole thing demolished than let her have the house. The symposium, then, arrived as both a deadline and a lifeline. Helena had arranged for Maya to give a presentation during the main session, prime time, in front of more than 800 architects, developers, city planners, and housing advocates. Maya had never been so terrified. She drove to Portland the day before with Iris and Dorothy, who had insisted on coming for moral support. Helena had booked them a hotel room, paid for by the symposium's sponsors. Iris thought staying in a hotel was the most exciting thing that had ever happened to her, jumping on the beds and ordering room service like a little queen. That night, Maya rehearsed her presentation, and for the 100th time, made her decision. She would tell the truth, the whole truth. Not just about finding Julian's work, but about her own fall from grace, about losing everything and buying a treehouse out of sheer desperation, about being ridiculed and judged and threatened. Because if she was going to advocate for affordable housing, she needed to speak from her lived experience, not from theoretical knowledge. On the morning of the presentation, Maya put on the clothes Helena had helped her buy. Professional, but unpretentious. A simple black dress, a blazer, comfortable shoes. She looked in the mirror and barely recognized herself. She looked like an architect again, someone who belonged in professional spaces, someone who had something important to say. The auditorium was enormous, with steeply tiered rows of seats and lights bright enough to make her squint. Maya stood backstage, her hands trembling as Helena introduced her. Maya Hartwell's story is one of resilience, discovery, and vision. She is here today not just to celebrate the remarkable work of Julian Thorne, but to challenge us all to think differently about housing, about sustainability, and about who gets to participate in architectural innovation. Maya walked onto the stage to polite applause. She looked out at the hundreds of faces and fought the urge to run. Then she saw Dorothy and Iris in the third row, both of them beaming at her. She took a deep breath and began. "A year ago, I lost everything," she said. "My marriage, my job, my home, my reputation. I was a licensed architect working for a prestigious Portland firm, and within 6 months, I was unemployed, nearly homeless, and being told I was a bad mother because I couldn't afford better housing." I bought a treehouse for $12,000 because it was all I had left. People laughed at me, called me crazy, tried to take my daughter away. The room fell silent. Maya clicked to her first slide, showing the treehouse from below, weathered and strange. But this treehouse wasn't just a desperate purchase. It was the life's work of Julian Thorne, one of the most brilliant architects of the 20th century. A man who walked away from fame and fortune because he believed architecture should serve people, not profit. She showed Julian's blueprints, explaining every innovation, every cost-cutting technique, every sustainable feature. She showed the construction notes, proving these weren't fanciful concepts but practical, buildable designs. She showed her own calculations, updating the material costs to current prices, demonstrating that a family of four could live in one of Julian's homes for less than $20,000 in construction costs. These designs prove something the development industry doesn't want to admit, Maya said, her voice growing stronger. It is possible to build beautiful, sustainable, affordable housing. It has always been possible. We've simply chosen not to, because there's more profit in building cheap, identical boxes that fall apart in 20 years and trap people in endless cycles of rent and debt. She told them about Cascade Holdings, about the legal threats and intimidation, about a company that would rather destroy innovation than change its business model. She showed photos of homeless encampments in Portland, of families living in cars, of the affordable housing crisis that was tearing communities apart all across America. Julian Thorne hid his work because he knew it was dangerous, Maya said. Dangerous to powerful interests, dangerous to the status quo. But he also believed it would survive until someone needed it enough to fight for it. I am that person. I am fighting because my daughter deserves a home, because millions of families deserve homes, because housing is a human right, not a luxury commodity. She concluded with a challenge. Julian's designs are being digitized and will be released as open-source architecture. Anyone can use them. Anyone can adapt them. Anyone can build them. I invite architects, developers, nonprofits, and communities to take these plans and make them real. Let's build. Let's innovate. Let's prove that we can do better than the system we have. Let's prove that Julian Thorne's vision wasn't naive. It was right. The auditorium erupted. People surged to their feet, the sound of their applause washing over Maya like a wave. She stood on that stage, tears streaming down her face, and felt something inside her break. Not breaking apart, but breaking open, like a shell cracking to reveal what was inside. She was no longer the disgraced architect. She was no longer the crazy treehouse lady. She was someone who had walked through hell and come out with a treasure. She was someone with something to say. The next 3 hours were a blur of conversations, business cards, reporters wanting interviews, architects wanting to collaborate. A nonprofit called the Home Builders Alliance offered to fund the construction of 5 pilot projects using Julian's designs. A developer from Seattle wanted to license the treehouse concept for an eco-village. A documentary filmmaker wanted to tell the whole story. But the most important moment came from a young woman, probably in her mid-20s, who approached Maya during a break. "I'm in graduate school for architecture," she said. "I've been told hundreds of times that affordable housing can't be beautiful, that sustainability is too expensive, that poor people should be grateful for whatever shelter they can get. Your presentation proved all of that is a lie. You changed my life today. Thank you." Maya hugged her. This stranger represented every architect who had ever been told to compromise their vision. "You're going to build something beautiful that everyone can afford," Maya whispered back. That's how you can thank me. The court battle with Cascade Holdings dragged on for 3 more months. Sarah Chen fought fiercely, and the media attention made it difficult for Cascade to operate in the shadows. When it became clear they couldn't win through legal means, they tried one last tactic. They offered Maya $2 million for the property and all rights to Julian's designs. Maya met with Richard Vance one last time. In Dorothy's living room, with Sarah present, Richard laid out the offer, painting it as generous, logical, the smart choice. "You could be financially set for life," he said smoothly. "Your daughter could go to any college. You could buy a real house, start your career over." "All I have to do is sell out," Maya said simply. "Dr. Hartwell, be reasonable," he purred. Maya stood, her voice quiet but unshakable. "Julian Thorne died protecting this work from people like you. I will not be the one to hand it over. This land, this treehouse, these designs, they are not for sale. Not for $2 million, not for 20 million. They were meant to be shared, not owned." Richard's mask of civility fell, revealing the raw anger beneath. "You're making a mistake. We could have been partners." "You could never be my partner," Maya said. "Partners respect each other. You only want to control and exploit. Get out of my house." Cascade Holdings finally dropped the lawsuit in June, likely calculating that the negative publicity was costing them more than the land was worth. Sarah Chen called with the news, and Maya hung up the phone before letting out a whoop of joy so loud that Iris came running, thinking something was wrong. "We won, sweetie! We won!" They danced around the treehouse, laughing and crying, and Maya felt lighter than she had in years. The weight of fear and uncertainty had vanished, replaced by something sharper: purpose. She knew what she had to do now. She knew who she was. In July, Maya established the Julian Thorne Foundation for Sustainable Housing. Helena Vazquez joined as the executive director. Dorothy donated her property to the foundation, creating a campus where architects could study Julian's techniques and test new sustainable designs. Tom Henderson became the head builder, hiring local crews and training them in the innovative construction methods. The first project broke ground in August. A cluster of 6 small homes on the outskirts of Riverside Bend, built using Julian's designs for families transitioning out of homelessness. Maya worked alongside the construction crews, her hands back on tool belts, her mind solving problems, and her heart full of purpose. The houses went up quickly. They were beautiful, small structures nestled among the trees, each costing just $18,000 in materials and completed in 6 weeks. When the families moved in, Maya stood with Iris and watched, a single mother with 3 children, tears running down her face as she stepped into a home that was hers. An elderly veteran who had been living in his car shook Tom's hand and said it was the most beautiful place he'd ever lived. A young couple with a baby stood on their small porch and looked out at the mountains as if they were seeing the world for the first time. "We did that," Iris whispered. "We sure did," Maya agreed. "And we're just getting started." The treehouse became exactly what Julian must have hoped it would be: a living laboratory and an educational center. Architecture students came from all over the country to study its design. The foundation offered workshops on sustainable building techniques. Tour groups visited on the weekends, walking across the swinging bridge, seeing the secret room, learning about the man who built it and the woman who found it. Maya finally had business cards printed. Maya Hartwell, founder and principal architect, the Julian Thorne Foundation. Sometimes she would look at them and marvel at how far she'd come from those dark days after her divorce. When she couldn't even get a job interview, the town of Riverside Bend transformed along with her. The housing project brought jobs, attracted positive attention, and gave the community something to be proud of. The general store started selling Treehouse pastries. The diner created a Thorn burger and donated the profits to the foundation. The school added sustainable architecture to its curriculum, with Maya guest lecturing once a quarter. One afternoon in October, exactly 1 year after she had moved into the treehouse, Maya stood on the deck, watching the leaves turn to gold. Iris was down below with a group of friends, leading them on a tour of the property with all the confidence of someone who had grown up surrounded by magic. Dorothy came up the ramp, moving slowly but steadily. She joined Maya at the railing. "Julian would be so proud," she said. "You did what he couldn't. You brought his work into the world." "We all did," Maya said. "You, me, Helena, Tom, Sarah, all of us." "But you were the catalyst," Dorothy insisted. "You were brave enough to buy a crazy treehouse, stubborn enough to stay when everyone judged you, smart enough to figure out its secrets, and courageous enough to fight for them. It wasn't us. It was you." Maya thought about the woman she'd been a year ago, beaten down and desperate, signing papers for a property everyone called cursed. She thought of the single mother terrified of losing her child, the disgraced architect who thought her career was over, the person who had felt small and worthless and defeated. That woman was gone. In her place was someone who had learned that falling apart sometimes meant rebuilding yourself into something stronger. Someone who discovered that the things people ridicule are often just innovations they aren't ready to understand. Someone who proved that one person with conviction can change the entire conversation. By November, the foundation had completed 12 housing units across 3 different projects. Each one was meticulously documented, with costs tracked, energy efficiency measured, and resident satisfaction surveyed. The data proved what Maya had argued all along. Julian's designs weren't just a beautiful theory, they were a practical reality. Construction costs averaged $19,300 per unit. Energy costs were 70% lower than in conventional housing, and every single resident reported feeling safer, happier, and more connected to their community than they ever had before. Universities began to reach out, proposing research partnerships. The State Housing Authority invited Maya to consult on affordable housing policy. A PBS documentary crew spent 2 weeks filming at the treehouse, interviewing Maya, Dorothy, and the families who had fallen into Julian's projects. The documentary, titled The Architect and the Trades, aired the following spring and won 3 awards. But success brought new challenges. The foundation was growing faster than Maya had anticipated, and she found herself spending more time in boardrooms than on construction sites. She hired staff, people who believed in the mission and brought skills she lacked: grant writers, project managers, communications specialists. The operation that had started with just her in a back room full of plants now employed 17 people. One evening in early December, Sarah sat at the table when a powerful wave of pressure seized her abdomen, stealing her breath. Marcus glanced at his watch. "That's one. Let's time them." He worked methodically, transforming a corner of the cabin into a birthing area. Clean sheets on the bed, medical instruments sterilizing in boiling water, makeshift stirrups fashioned from clean rope and cushions. Every movement efficient, with no wasted energy, no panic. Sarah watched through waves of rising discomfort. "Have you really done this before?" "Twice in Afghanistan, once in South Sudan." He positioned lanterns to get the best light. Not ideal conditions, but we managed. Another contraction hit her, harder than the first. Sarah breathed through it, using the techniques from her birthing classes. Marcus noted the time. 12 minutes since the last one. Still early. First babies usually take their time. He arranged pillows to support her back. Try to rest between them. Conserve your strength. And those men outside? Marcus's expression hardened for a moment. That's a secondary concern right now. This cabin's been standing for 40 years. It's solid construction. The entrance is defensible. The clinical assessment was strangely reassuring. Sarah nodded, then flinched as another contraction began to build. 8 minutes, Marcus noted, surprised. Moving faster than I expected. He went to the stove and returned with a cup of herbal tea. Raspberry leaf. It helps with labor. Sarah nodded gratefully. You just have that lying around? It's good for a number of medicinal purposes. A faint smile touched his lips. Though I'll admit, obstetric supplies weren't my top priority when I scouted this place. The next few hours passed in a blur of escalating contractions. Marcus transformed before Sarah's eyes, the gruff recluse replaced by a focused, competent physician. He checked her progress periodically, his clinical detachment making the intimate examinations less awkward than they might have been. 6 centimeters, he reported. Good progress. By nightfall, the contractions were coming every 3 minutes. Sarah gripped the edge of the bed, sweat matting her hair. I don't know if I can do this. You're already doing it. Marcus's voice was firm, an anchor in the storm of pain. Your body knows what to do, trust it. A noise outside drew his attention to the window. Dusk had fallen, and with it came the sound of movement in the surrounding brush, too deliberate for wildlife. They're back, Sarah whispered between contractions. Marcus moved quickly to the window, peering out cautiously. One man, on watch. He retrieved a shotgun, positioning it nearby but out of sight of the windows. Then he returned to Sarah, coaching her through another contraction, as if there had been no interruption. Deep breath. That's it. The contractions intensified again, now only a minute apart. Sarah cried out, unable to contain the sound. I need to push. Marcus examined her again. Not yet. Almost, but not yet. Breathe through the urge. The noise outside stopped abruptly. Marcus tensed, listening. They heard you. I can't be quiet, Sarah gasped as another contraction peaked. Don't try. He moved to position himself between the bed and the door, within reach of both Sarah and the gun. Let them hear it. Might even work in our favor. How? She managed to ask between breaths. Few things are more terrifying than a woman in labor, Marcus said, the faint smile returning. Even hardened men give that a wide berth. As if in answer, the footsteps outside retreated toward the tree line. Marcus nodded in satisfaction. See? Tactical advantage. Sarah would have laughed if another contraction hadn't seized her. This one was different. An overwhelming, irresistible urge to bear down. Marcus, she gasped. It's time. He checked one last time, then nodded, all trace of humor gone. You're right. 10 centimeters. On the next contraction, push. Outside, darkness was complete. The watcher had retreated. But Marcus knew he hadn't gone far. Inside, a new life was about to begin. Two forces, creation and threat, converged on this small cabin in the middle of nowhere. Ready? Marcus asked, positioning himself to guide the baby's arrival. Sarah nodded, gathering her strength as the next contraction began to swell. Push, he instructed calmly. Bring your child into the world. The sound of shattering glass broke the concentrated intensity of the delivery. Marcus snapped his head toward the back window, where a gloved hand was now reaching through a jagged hole, fumbling for the latch. Sarah, keep pushing, he commanded, his voice belying the urgency of his movements as he moved swiftly toward the intruder. With remarkable upper body strength, Marcus launched himself from his chair, using the momentum to seize the extending arm and twist it sharply. A cry of pain came from outside as Marcus slammed the arm against the window frame, forcing the fingers to release a hunting knife that clattered to the floor. Sarah screamed with another contraction, her focus split between the demands of her body and the struggle at the window. I'm here, Marcus called to her, maintaining his grip on the intruder while reaching for the shotgun with a free hand. Keep going. You're doing great. The intruder wrenched his arm free, disappearing from the broken window. Marcus quickly jammed a metal toolbox into the opening, then returned to Sarah's side, the shotgun across his lap. That was impressive, Sarah panted. Combat training, upper body strength makes up for a lot. He positioned himself to continue assisting the delivery, maintaining a clear view of all entry points. Focus on pushing now. Muffled voices murmured outside, several of them. The intruder hadn't come alone. How many? Sarah asked, gritting her teeth as another contraction crested. 3, maybe 4. Marcus's voice remained steady. Don't you worry about them. Hard not to, she managed, bearing down with the contraction. They're not getting in. His certainty was a comfort. Not while I'm here. The baby's head began to crown. I can see her, Marcus announced, his professional detachment momentarily broken by awe. One more big push,